Welcome to Open Vision, the space where we explore what is essential in creating a brighter future. My name is Mariama, and I started this podcast series with 3 goals in mind. First, to show that across industries and across the globe, people are leading initiatives that contribute to a brighter future for people and planet. Secondly, to prove to you, the impact maker, that you're not alone, even though it might feel like that sometimes. And 3, to find universal strategic tactics and insight that all of us can use in our work, whether that's leadership, impact, sustainability, regeneration, or innovation. This is the space where we come together to explore and broaden our horizon on what is possible and on what is essential. Hence, I introduced the concept of Cathedral Thinking, which entails adopting a long-term vision that inspires us to contribute, even though we may never witness the end result. It's akin to building a cathedral where both laying each stone and envisioning the grandeur of the finished structure play crucial roles. Now, this episode feels a little bit different from the others. I'm not sitting down with leaders to discuss how they are making impact in the world, but I had the honor to attend and cover the Inner Development Goals Summit in Stockholm. Well, we started this series with a conversation surrounding Agenda 2030 and the SDGs with Dr. Situmi Oldada. And our conclusion was that we need to do more. We're not doing enough. Additionally, most of the leaders that I spoke to here on Open Vision, they highlight the need to tend to inner development in order to enable external impact making. And so it was only logical that we connect cathedral thinking with the inner development goals. I wanted to explore how the IDG framework serves as an effective strategy to realize impact and drive real positive societal and climatic change. And boy, was I in for a surprise. The summit was a beacon of light and insight. In this episode, you will hear from some of the keynote speakers as well as attendees. These are soundbites that contribute to the building of our collective cathedral. And if you feel inspired, I highly recommend that you visit innerdevelopmentgoals.org to learn more. A final word on this year's theme of the summit, the space in between, or as I would say, the liminal space. Let's take a closer look at this term liminal, which comes from the Latin limen, meaning threshold. It's the idea of standing in the doorway between 2 states, neither fully in one nor the other. Liminal spaces are places of ambiguity where something known is ending, but the next thing hasn't really been fully realized. And to me, that's a beautiful metaphor of the current state of the world. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's first listen to IDG CMO Daniel Hires.
I think the beauty and the genius of it is that it's a reflection of yourself, what you see in that title. It can be interpreted in so many different ways. I mean, you can literally look at, what is the space in between 2 physical objects. You can look at it in time-wise. You can look at it as that this describes perhaps the times that we are in. You can look at it as a transitional metaphor that, we are the proverbial soup of the butterfly or the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. You can look at it as it's the pause in between 2 notes that actually makes for these 2 notes having, somewhat of a separation. There's so many ways to look at it. And I think that is really the beauty, because I think what we're trying to avoid is that single story, that one-dimensional way of looking at things, even if we have a framework that sometimes suggests that we are trying to bring people's attention into a certain direction. I think we have to be very careful that we're not, so normative that we are trying to, almost dominate every other voice that exists in this space.
And Katharina Moser program curator and director of the IDG Summit, master of ceremony.
Developing on the inside to reach different results on the outside is not the easy route to choose. But it is a route that we believe has the power to enable us to deal with our global challenges. And many of you have come here today because you share that belief in humanity's capacity to develop and through that create a more just, a more peaceful, and more sustainable future. The Inner Development Goals are a framework of 23 skills in 5 dimensions that can help us achieve this. But most of all, we want the IDG Summit to be a place that's real. We want to look at the parts that are dark and difficult and lonely as much as the ones that lift us up. We want to voice doubts that creep up as much as dreams so big they scare us. And we want to turn this into a brave space where we can hold complexities and challenges and difficulties together. It is in the space in between where transformation and growth happens. It will not be easy, but it will be worth it. Every single step of the way.
Let's move to the outside first. What is happening when we look at the climate? What is happening in the Arctic? And how is what is happening to the Arctic ice affecting all of us? Gail Whiteman, professor of sustainability at the University of Exeter Business School and founder of the Arctic Base Camp, shares the warning call of the Arctic, as well as a call for courage.
Now, when we sit there and we actually look at the ice, what do we see? Well, we see a magnificent place. And we're awed by the beauty. But importantly, it actually tells us 4 things that are relevant for the challenges that we face. The first is that the way we have built our economies and our societies is toxic and it's destructive. It has given us a lot, particularly in the developed world, but what it has started to do is melt the Arctic, melt the Antarctic, which are causing extreme weather events everywhere. Now they're causing it in very vulnerable places around the world, like Asia, Africa continent, Latin America, parts of the US, parts of Canada, parts of Europe, particularly where vulnerable people do not have the ability to buffer or resist or move away. On top of that, we build plans like the SDGs, which look wonderful. They're a direction post. And what we're seeing is that those are also on thin ice. There is absolutely no way that we will be able to, as a world, reach the SDGs unless we stabilize the polar ice. Now, I'm a social scientist, so I'm coming here to you to talk about global risk. My expertise is in sense making. How do we actually make sense of environmental change? The way we make sense, the way we understand it, which has been built on the Holocene, which is a period of incredible environmental stability over the last 10,000 years. Our sense-making struggles. We do not pay attention to the weather unless it's nice. But the problem is with an Earth system that is moving into volatile, non-linear change, which is where we are now, is that those shocks are going to come fast and furious, and we still have to pay attention to those small changes. Now, most of us do not pay attention to the Arctic ice. So as we make sense of our daily life, of our organizational life, and as our national and international collective lives, we have to bring in that environmental understanding and have that shape the decisions that we make. The Inner Development Goals talk a lot about courage, and it is something that I've been working in for a long time. And if there is one thing I think the Arctic ice teaches us, and that is that we need to find courage. We have incomplete knowledge. We have incomplete relationships, we have incomplete technology, and we most certainly have incomplete skills. But what we do have is human connection and the ability to dig deep and to come together and to actually face what is, without question, an existential threat.
So how do we pay attention? How do we connect to care? How do we start making sense of what is going on in order to take action? It's about taking responsibility, and that actually starts with the way in which we greet each other. Before we connect with someone, before we greet each other, there's a gap. Again, we see the space in between. And Paul explains the importance of bridging that gap in a way that creates true connection. Here's Paul Mbikayi, civil servant to humanity and the government of the Netherlands.
The biggest group in the whole world greets on the same way you just greet. Good morning. So I wish you well, but I'm not responsible if you are well or not. But it's a wish. You know, in Lingala, one of the languages of my hometown, we say mbote, well, just that. I wish you well. That is the part of people who are here. Can I share with you another way of saying good morning, good afternoon, and then make you a little bit uneasy because there is a gap between us. And the conversation we have to have is how to bridge the gap. So I'm going to greet you, but not on a way you just greet each other. In isiZulu, we greet each other by telling the other, I see you. Instead of asking you, are you here? I'm telling you, I see you because you are important for me. And the greeting of telling people you see them, I cannot neglect you anymore. You are part of the family. It's the other way than Descartes, who taught us that I think and therefore I am. Most of the IDGs, they are based on that thinking. We are prisoners of thinking. And those who do not start by thinking, but by feeling, they are strange. And I'll tell you, with all my heart, I see you. Now I ask you, do you see me? And when you see me, what do you see? I am because we are.
Seeing each other is seeing the world. Let's listen to Vinh, PhD and former program director of the Gross National Happiness Center in Bhutan and founder of Eurasia Learning Institute for Happiness and Well-Being, who addresses the root cause of this connection.
If we wanted to go upstream and try to change the root causes of armed conflict, violence, and all the other challenges that we're facing, including melting Arctic and climate change, we had to work at these two levels: structural, systemic level, and inner dimensions, and see how these two articulate. But from the perspective of gross natural happiness, the idea is actually quite simple. It's the idea to say that we are mistaken the goal and the means. We, in the modern Western-oriented societies, tend to focus on economic growth as if that was the goal of development. While economic growth is obviously important, but it's not a goal, it's just a mean. The goal should be to enhance the quality of life, the happiness of all the people, and the well-being of all life forms. And so it would be reversing it and saying, no, economic growth is not a goal. Happiness and well-being is a goal. Economic growth is one of the many tools, one of the many elements that contribute, if used in the right way. What do we mean by happiness and well-being? Beyond personal subjective feelings. Not feeling happy, but being happy. And we came up with a threefold framework. The first condition is knowing how to live in harmony with and care for ourselves, our true being, so that our life becomes a manifestation of our highest aspiration and deepest values. Learning to live in harmony with and caring for ourselves. Learning how to live in harmony with and caring for others and society. And we know that the quality of human relationships, friendship and love, relationship based on trust, on faithfulness, on confidence, on respect, play a central role in our well-being. And this can be learned, this can be taught. Social skills, emotional skills, happiness skills can be learned, can be taught. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, learning to live in harmony with and to care for our beautiful and fragile planet and for the environment. So these three reconnection with ourselves, with others, and with the planet are the foundation of what we call happiness from the perspective of gross national happiness.
I am because we are emphasizes why it is so important to take care of yourself and invest in your own inner development to contribute to our larger collective. Sophie, who I met at the summit, describes this beautifully.
So I was at this activity, it was a peace circle, and I saw a friend of mine at the circle who started to feel a lot of sadness, and I could see her crying. So I walked across the circle and on my way to take care of her, to hug her. And I was stopped by one of the person who's here, who's called the anchor, who are responsible to help us deal with emotion. She came to me and she looked at me in the eyes and said, you can't take care of somebody until you can't take care of somebody you're worried about. Take care of yourself first until you can feel in yourself the trust that they can take care of themselves, and then you go. That's also true for the environment. I can't take care of the environment if I don't take care of myself first and start to believe that Mama Earth can take care of herself, and then I can help. Yes. And a lot of what's happening here with the IDG is about that, is about taking care of yourself, and it all comes from within. It comes from understanding who I am and only doing what I here to do and not carrying the whole burden of the world, but do my part. And I can only do my part by taking care of myself. My name is Sophie Legendre. I come from Montreal in Canada. When I grow up, I'll know what I'm going to do. But what I think I'm doing, it has to do with connecting and helping giants grow.
Let's take a closer look at the IDG framework, which consists of 5 dimensions: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. Let's listen to Erik Fernholm, co-founder of 29K Foundation and co-initiator of the IDG, who highlights traps of our time.
The worldview that we've been shaped by is very much rational man knows why he or she is doing what they are doing and optimizing for their goals. If they get what they want, they'll be happy. Success. In the being domain, this is being individualistic and separate. When entering any situation, what's in it for me? I mean, that's the starting point of disconnection. But it's usually the starting point of business relationships, right? Instead of what can we create here that would be more beautiful. Second trap, thinking, reductionistic, linear, short-sighted. When the Western mind defines the bee, it almost never includes the flower, right? But they're a bee-flower system, but we separate. Another trap. In the relating domain, transactional, extractive, despiritualized. Instead of saying, you know what, there's something sacred that I am in service of, that's higher than me, and that I will actually be in service of. Collaborating, self-optimize, even at the expense of the whole. And finally, acting. From a sense of importance and of flow. The faster we move, the more engaging it is. If we just have a clear goal, direct feedback, full concentration, this is the conditions of flow. But it is also the conditions of not reflecting. Another trap, structural, not in the dimensions, is also the financial structure that we have. And to say that there is a trap to saying if I have external ownership that pushes me to quarterly only deliver on financial means, that means that I have a much harder time actually acting for other values, right? And I think this is one of the conversations we really need to have. And I think that there is this invitation that maybe there's a different metaphor for life, that life is not a journey in this territory that is known. What if the metaphor was this? Life is not a journey. The point is not to get to the end. What if life is like music? The point is to appreciate it. It's the sacred gift that we've gotten. The point is to add to it. It's to dance. The point of music is to dance.
And we're staying with music, jazz, and coherence. Here's Pamela's take on the space in between.
So for me, the space in between is when we can listen so deeply and become so present so we can tap into our full holistic body intelligence and use our body as an instrument to sense what is beyond my individual self. So I actually can start to sense and presencing what is in the whole, like the whole system. And when we do that as a group, we can sink into coherence. As you know, a jazz band who's starting to jazz and then suddenly they kick into that jam and they start to play music, or the music start to play them from a deeper river of creativity. And then the audience know that they are in flow because they become a part of the flow. Yes. So there is sometimes less separation, sometimes no separation, because there is a space of shared awareness where creativity comes through and moves us. So for me, the space in between is to put your consciousness in a different gravity point that I name as the intersubjective, and that Otto Scharmer is in his theory of you, or Dan Siegel is in his wheel of awareness. But that's for me is where my curiosity lays, to explore what that can do for us collectively and what that can do for the systemic shift we're in.
I'm almost speechless. That never happens. There's many ways in which we can give expression to whatever we feel is going on or what should happen next. Art is one of those mediums that helps us do so beautifully. Let's listen to Simon Sharkey, one of the founding directors of the National Theatre of Scotland and artistic director and CEO of The Necessary Space.
Once upon a time, in a place far from here, the birds of the world were called to a conference. The hoopoe, the noblest of the birds, stood and addressed them. Birds of the world, our Mother Earth is ill. She's in crisis, and we are to blame, for we've lost our path and we've lost our purpose. We must find a leader who can lead us back to enlightenment. We must go in search of the Cymorg. A huge flutter passed amongst the birds, for they knew to go in search of the Cymorg, the most mythical of birds, they must cross the 7 valleys full of danger. The sparrow was the first to speak. I'm a sparrow. My heart is like a pea. Surely it will burst if I'm to travel 7 valleys. The peacock, the proudest of birds, I am the prettiest of birds, and my feathers will lose their shine if I am to make the journey. The penguin. I can't even fly. How can I travel 7 valleys? The skylark, the albatross, the eagle, who said, I am the king of birds. I soar above all of you. I have no need for 7 valleys or to seek the Simorg. A huge flutter of fear and fury passed amongst the birds until the hoopoe said, think not of yourself, for as you are one, so we all are one. The birds settled and rose as one and traveled across to start their journey. In the valley of the quest, they suffered the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. In the valley of knowledge, they were overwhelmed by truth and learned that not everyone's truth is the same as the others. In the valley of love, they learned that letting others voluntarily evolve, compassion and connection would be the only things that would take them forward. In the valley of confusion, they learned that not even love would be enough. They needed action. In the valley of detachment, they began to lose their way and they began to lose each other. In the valley of annihilation, they were gone. Only shadows existed. In the valley of enlightenment, they searched for the Simorg and found nothing, only the echo of the energy of the birds when they began. And it was then that they realized that energy was the Simorg. Birds of the world, look around your flock, feel that energy. We have a great journey ahead of us. Thank you.
The amount of love in our lives keeps us actually on the planet for longer. So why is it that when we go to work, we talk about engagement? Does engagement keep you on the planet for longer? I haven't seen that study. I don't know. But I think that there's this question, how is it that we can create in us the conditions for holding each other? I think this is what great leadership is people who create the conditions for others to like each other better because we were together. And wow, isn't that what our planet needs right now? For us to create the conditions in us for us to like each other better.
That was Jennifer Garvey Berger, PhD, co-founder and CEO of Cultivating Leadership. The IDG Foundation is on a journey of co-creation, building a global ecosystem to accelerate human growth and collective learning. Let's listen to the executive director, Artem Henriksson.
I'm going to say a few words about our theory of change. If we want to do something, let's imagine what we want to do and work backwards, right? And I'm going to invite you to co-create and act with us in some of the projects. So I think many of us at least, agree that we have a problem of tackling some of the adaptive challenges. And we think that inner skills can help. And it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve everything, but it's one of the many things that needs to happen. We have our mission, but for it to happen, we think there are 4 things that are essential. The first one is an understanding for inner development that can also be polarizing. And the understanding for inner development, the IDGs points to something. It helps people intuitively understand in a simple language what this can be about, and so we can go beyond the stereotypes of inner development just being sitting cross-legged, or meditating, or New Age, or whatever some of the prejudice are there, or too rigid, religious, dogmatic. or too dry and scientific? How can we understand what inner development is, but most importantly, point to the good practices based on scientific knowledge and, of course, with respect for the ancient wisdom and traditions that's been here for years and years? How do we prioritize this into our own lives and into the lives of our organizations? How much time do we take, which I think is the most precious resource we have, but also how much resources do we actually spend on it? And we need to connect across the communities. One of the difficult challenges for us to keep, there is a lot of silos because this is a new field that is still emerging, just like sustainability was 20 or 30 years ago. And we're not always speaking to each other across the silos. We need to create a space, and also tomorrow and throughout the days, where people are welcome with different perspectives, and we are curious about that. And we ask, how would inner development work in your context, in your organization? The communities of practice, we need to talk about different methods, and we need to talk about what works in which context. There are good practices, and there are actually practices that are not so good. And we also need to know in which context are they good or not so good, and promote the stuff that is useful, that is healthy, and that works. And last but not least, once this gets structural and into policy changes and development, this is where it makes the difference.
The use of and application of the IDGs in organizations and in business is important, and the summit featured a myriad of leaders who have proven that it works and that it is possible. One of them is Kristen Cordell, White House Leadership Development Program.
I have the distinct pleasure of helping think through the climate and sustainability training for the U.S.'s largest employer, the federal government, 2 million employees strong. And we've been piloting and testing a number of new ways to do that. And I'll never forget, one of the first trainings I piloted was for an executive group, a group of upcoming executives in the government. And I was on a very serious panel. How do we do this work given the complexities we're facing? And instead of launching into a policy or strategy or executive order, instead I said, we invest in our people, in our resilience, in our perseverance, in our ability to collaborate. And suddenly the room, it was 100 people, not as big as this room, but suddenly the whole room got quiet and really present, because those seat-rising executives had been waiting for someone to give them permission to move in a space where they were investing in their own resilience and taking on those challenges.
And here's the data to prove that that investment actually pays off big time. Here's Tony Bond, Executive Vice President and Chief Impact Officer of Great Place to Work.
I would say to transform leaders, transform people, but they also transform organizations, and they can transform the world. When we ask people, how well is your organization having an impact on the environment, on society, on human well-being? There were 3 things that really stood out. They were correlated to the answer that when people feel really good about those things, what are the behaviors they're hearing and seeing from their leaders? First and foremost was, these leaders are strong alliance or connection to the values of the organization. And if I had to interpret that based on our research, these leaders communicate well, teams are communicating well within the team and across the teams, and the leaders are coming up with a direction and that really resonates with people, living the values. The second thing that came out of the story was that these leaders are very good at being honest and ethical. Why is that important? One of the dimensions of collaboration is trust. It's hard to have trust if we have leaders that we don't feel like they're honest and ethical. So by being that type of leader, I'm creating an atmosphere where people can share. They can take risk and not feel bad about it. Last but not least, if you think in terms of co-creation, these leaders were engaging, encouraging innovation within their organization, innovation and risk-taking. So if I summed up some of the skills within the collaborative dimension, it rings true to the data and the research we collected around the globe around what makes a difference in this case from an ESG perspective.
Here's Mézu Ofoegbu, artist and founder of Infinity Village Lab.
That's what inner development is. It's internal capacity building. So how are we building our capacity internally to think differently, do differently, create differently, etc., right? We're connected. We're so connected to the people that came before us, and just as connected to the people that come after, you know? And I think what being alive is becoming aware of that.
There was one person I needed to talk to at this summit, and it was Tommy. He was everywhere, on stage, in front of the stage, backstage, and I was so curious what he had captured. I asked him, what do you know to be true after this summit? Here's Tommy Gärd, filmmaker, creative director at Visionary Films, Stockholm.
There is this shift going on. For me, the shift means that we can open up and connect with the heart, connect with ourselves, the depths of ourselves, and live from there, and less from the autopilot, or less from the thoughts, and less from stress and worry, living from that deeper knowledge that we all carry inside of ourselves.
I wanted to say the word remember.
Yeah, remembrance, that's a good word, because I think deep down there is a remembrance in all of us of what we are, and the connectedness that we have in society moved away from or lost. So one takeaway for me was that I heard someone at the summit, they talk about how we don't have an environmental crisis, but it's a behavioral crisis.
That was
Erik Fernholm, right? I would go even deeper, and the behavioral crisis is just an effect of our disconnection or our spiritual crisis. And spirit, for some people that can sound woo-woo or airy-fairy or abstract, but for me it's just being in connection to the depths of yourself, to reconnect with ourselves, and by doing so we also reconnect with nature and other people, and finding all the good things that we all have inside of us.
As we're nearing the closing, I want to share Rachael's words of wisdom. This is Rachael Jacobs, PhD, an academic, teaching artist, and community activist.
There are so many ways that we can reach out to each other and address the challenges of this world, and right now we are rising to do that. I have the great privilege of travelling around the world to teach people to fight one of the darkest parts of humanity, and that is racism. And here are two things that I've learned on that journey. Number one, I have learned that joy is a greater driver of action than fear and hate. And the second thing I've learned is if somebody reaches their hand towards you, you should reach back.
If someone reaches, you reach back. We cannot go at it alone. In the space in between, known structures and patterns dissolve. They make room for emergence, a process by which new, complex systems or ideas unfold from simpler beginnings in unexpected ways. This is where the inner work becomes essential, serving as the grounding force that helps us navigate through uncertainty and really allows for transformation to take root. It's an inside job that takes collective effort. So as all of us are contributing to that beautiful cathedral on planet Earth during the liminal space, we focus on inner development. It allows us to have trust and work with what is uncertain rather than resisting it. It prepares us to meet the unknown with a calm mind and a heart that is open to possibility and open to connection. This is the necessary foundational work that allows us to create a brighter future for people and planet. I see you. The next IDG Summit is in Stockholm, Sweden, October 15th to 17th, 2025. For more information on the IDGs, go to innerdevelopmentgoals.org. Please connect with me via openvision.space.